We're about to be live.
You have some more copies of the agenda for the month.
Just listen to this. No, 1, 2, 3 Main Street does. Yeah. And on Google Earth, it shows that. Okay. It's behind there.
Yeah.
It's not, it's like a flag property. No, it's a legit address. When I Googled it, it pops right up. We're gonna have a public hearing. Because we, yeah, we're having that. So we do, so the open meeting, talk about product, have an open public hearing for 52, 54 minutes, and then open the public and then discuss that. Talk about it. And then open public hearing, close that one.
Are you ready to get started, or?
Yeah, we're ready.
I think we're recording, so we're ready to go.
All right, I would have a motion to open the meeting.
I'll make a motion.
Seconded.
Okay, so the order of the meeting is we're gonna talk about 5 Platicville first. Then we're gonna go do 52, 54 Mannheim, and then we're gonna do 1, 2, 3 Main Street. Okay, so the people from 5 Platicville, are they here? Yeah, just go on up and take a seat. It's pretty casual. We haven't had a live meeting in a long time. Yeah, ever.
You do have the 2 public hearings first. Were you gonna wait to have the public hearings?
5 Platicville, I don't think has a public hearing, or it does?
5,
no-
that does not, this is the first time they're on, so that's why I think typically the board will start with the public hearings and then go on to discuss the applications afterwards in case anyone is there from the public to comment during the hearings.
Okay.
Is it okay if we bypass that for this meeting and start with 5?
Is there I can't tell if there's a lot of people waiting for the public hearing or not to comment.
This is gonna probably be 2, okay.
We have no objection. We're one of the public hearings. We have, the village has no objection if you want to do this first.
Okay, you want to speak first and so you can get out here?
I mean, I'm here for public hearing, but
Yes.
this is only gonna be 2 minutes.
Yeah, I think this is gonna be fast. Okay, so what's going on with that?
Okay, so we got site plan approval to do the bar, a new bar restaurant in this location. We got final approval last Tuesday, and the rear wall, we're basically keeping the exact same location, the 2 rear walls. But it would be easier to just knock it down and replace the wall right in the exact same spot. But we spoke with Corey, and we need to remove the wall and rebuild it. We need authorization from the zoning board. So that's what we're requesting. It's possible to use that wall. It's just by the time they're done with it, it's not gonna be much.
Okay, so it's almost like it's a repair, but you're gonna knock it down.
Right.
Okay, and it's not moving at all?
Nah.
Okay, all right. Do you guys have any questions? You have any questions? Okay, actually, at this point, do do we just have, can we give them approval, or is that something we have to
I'll
set?
go over the process because this is a little bit of a unique application. I don't know if you recall, I believe maybe you, Sean, and possibly Noah were on the board when you had the Stewart's project come before you, where they were rebuilding the gas station. So this is a similar situation in that this is a non-conforming, in that case, it was a non-conforming use, but in this case, it's a non-conforming structure. So the rear wall or walls that they're seeking to rebuild currently don't comply with the zoning code. But there is this provision in 21254 sub D, I believe, that says the applicant for any reason can choose to rebuild or reconstruct a non-conforming structure, but doing so requires a recommendation from the planning board, which they have received, and then it requires the authorization from this board. And it's not your typical type of variance. Instead, the authorization has a different standard for you to apply, and that is that the rebuilding would not constitute a substantial enlargement of the use, and it would provide better aesthetics, higher setbacks, or assist in alleviating existing nuisance characteristics. So they're not changing the location. They're not increasing any nonconformity. To my understanding, it's for structural and aesthetic reasons why they're seeking to rebuild. That said, it does require a public hearing. So you will have to schedule a public hearing on this application, and it also does have to get referred to the county. So I would suggest tonight that you can do three things. You could classify the action as type 2 under seeker. You could refer the application to the Ulster County Planning Board, and you can schedule a public hearing for your June meeting. And I believe you should hear back from the county by then.
Okay.
On that note, I would like to see pictures or some kind of rough plan to just show exactly where it currently is, so that we're aware.
Yeah, well,
Can we look at those during public?
yeah, we can do this.
Yeah,
one
we
next
can do
time.
this during public hearing. I just wasn't. I
Yeah,
didn't have it
Well,
here.
this isn't a rush. We,
Yeah.
they have to do all the things.
Mhm.
Okay,
And perhaps
all right.
because there was the site plan submitted, maybe Andy, if you could identify just what walls they are on the plan and show that.
This is the municipal parking lot here. This is the property right now. This was the old laundromat, sorry.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. This is the old laundromat, and he's expanding it here, and then it was a smoke shop. And this is the wall that behind here is, it was Oasis.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. All
So
right.
this is the wall.
Oh, I thought it was the other wall in front for the parking lot.
Yeah, this one's okay.
Okay.
For
I looked at
code.
the wrong wall.
Yeah, it's the back wall, but
Okay.
going backwards.
Okay.
Okay, all right, so we are going to, set a public hearing for next meeting. We are going to send this to the county planning board, and we're going to make this a type 2 under SECA. Did I say that right, Ashley?
It's a type 2 under seeker. That's correct.
Yep, type 2 under SECA. Okay, so we'll see you guys next week.
So you would need to do, if you could have motions for each of those. So if you could do a motion to classify the action, or you could even do one motion, I could frame it for you now. A motion to classify the application as a type 2 under seeker, refer the application to the Ulster County Planning Board, and schedule a public hearing for your June meeting, which is June 14th at 7 p.m.
Ashley, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
There was definitely the impression we got with Rick at the last meeting was that it was gonna be something that could happen at one meeting. It's definitely what was discussed. I just want to confirm that it definitely does need to go to the public hearing in county.
It does, and it's a requirement. It's not something that the state law or the village's zoning procedures spell out a different procedure. So it always has, whenever there's a matter before the zoning board, it does always require a public hearing, whether it's an area variance or an appeal or this type of separate authorization, because there's nothing that says otherwise. So this is the process that's been done in the past, and that we'll have to continue.
All right, is everyone good?
Yeah, so,
Okay.
do you want me to make that motion? That
Yeah,
should just outline.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
okay. We're good.
And all in favor? Did you all vote?
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye. Okay, cool. All right.
Great,
That was, yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I just get a, yeah,
Thank you,
Yeah,
sorry.
we're still on a Zoom or.
yeah, so, yeah, it's a little awkward. Okay, so the next one is 52, 54 Mainheim. You guys could come down. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I'd like to have a motion to have an open meeting for,
Open the public
hearing.
hearing for,
Oh, I would like to open the public hearing on 52, 54 Manheim.
I'll make a motion to open.
Second.
So anyone who wants to speak on 52, 55 from the public? Is anyone out in Zoom land? Okay, so no one's in Zoom land. Okay, so I guess we can close the public hearing. Motion to close the public hearing?
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so that's closed. Okay, so would the people from 52, 55 Manhattan like to come down and talk to us?
Mr. Chairman, I'm here via Zoom, but I'm
Okay,
happy to virtually come down and talk to you.
awesome. I don't see you on the picture. And who am I speaking to? Oh, there you are.
There you go. Keith
What's your
Leibold.
name?
Keith Leibold, and
Okay.
representing us is Andy Willingham. I had a meeting conflict tonight,
Okay,
so I couldn't make it live. I apologize.
okay, so,
Okay, I don't know how much you guys discussed at the last meeting, Keith, but so we just kind of go over the two variances. All right, so the first one is the height variance. The code has a maximum height of 30 feet. And what they're proposing is 34 feet, which would essentially block, and we send in the renderings and we send some elevation views. They're gonna have, jump in, Keith, if I mess this up, but essentially they're gonna have all the mechanical equipment on the roof, solar panels, and the 4-foot parapet would block all that. So the 4 foot is really for aesthetic reasons to block that. And then the variance is actually for 37'5" to do a gable, two gables, also for aesthetic reasons. So that's the request for height, all for aesthetic reasons. The other variance is in the senior citizen development standards. There's like a couple pages of standards. One of them is the two means of vehicular access. And this building is so close to the road, and it's only 80 feet from the road. There's only about 100 feet of driveway here. To do two means of access would be basically the two accesses right next to each other on the 32 to fill that requirement. We looked at as replaced, and I can show you the topo, but it's basically like you'd have big retaining walls and all kinds of grading, and there's some big nice trees back there too. So it really doesn't work there as far as topography. So we're asking for one means of access. We had the fire department has looked at it and they're still reviewing it, but we're willing to provide turnarounds and all kinds of things to make it safe. And there's also a path around the back of the building for a small pickup truck to get to as well. So we feel like it's a safe access.
Yeah, I'm the height variance. I understand the not. How much is this project going to be? Like, what's the budget on this project?
Keith?
Give me 1 second. It's going to be around $11 million all done.
All right, so $11 million to put a road into Hasbrook is not, in terms of percentage of the $11 million, I don't think that's a ridiculous thing. and that's the right way to do it. You have old people. I mean, if a
We
tree
don't,
or that thing gets blocked, if that one road gets blocked, those people can't sprint to the road. You're gonna need, if there's an emergency, that's why that's in there, that the building next to you, right next to you, that's an apartment complex that's not filled with old people, has an egress that they built a road. How you bought the property next to it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's amazingly long.
Yeah.
They went through great efforts to put that extra road in to be compliant with the code, and no one in there is handicapped, no one in there is carrying oxygen bottles, no one in there is doing anything. I'm having a really hard time envisioning a senior citizen home with one entrance. That doesn't seem to make any sense to me.
You mentioned that having two entrances in the front would put them right next to each other, but you also mentioned that the path around the back was like a maintenance situation for pickup. Is it possible to continue that to the road?
Yeah,
So
that
at
was
least-
one of the ideas we threw around.
Because this look, I mean, I don't have the exact measurement, but it looks like you only would have to expand the sidewalk another 4 foot.
Right.
To make that a second access.
Right, and we can do that.
we are happy. I just would like to say we're here in part at the request of the planning board. So that's one of the reasons we're requesting both of these variances, given their review of the site conditions. Connecting to Hasbrook would require us to go down that slope through another parcel to get to the road. So we'd have to procure that. We're already cutting that parcel down to the minimum size. And it was the topography in the front and the access onto the DOT roadway, given how close we were, we felt that a single 30-foot wide access was sufficient for the needs. The layout, the shape of the property and the topography along the front, I don't want to say it's impossible because nothing's impossible. I'm going to say that to do it would require major reworking of the whole frontage of that parcel. It wouldn't be sightly. I don't know whether it would function well. And in our discussions with the planning board, they sent us to your board. If you disagree and want us to go back and take another pass at it with the planning board, I can certainly do that and see where that goes.
Could I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
Who owns the lot that you referenced that would be compromised? It's already a minimum lot size. Is that where
Sure.
you're-
The single family home lot we actually purchased as well. Because originally we were told we would have to do an easement through there for the water and sewer. They came back and said they wanted us to do it down on Route 32, but that lot size is being readjusted down because we needed the area for the other parcel. So, and it would require us going down that back slope by the wetlands, which is really what the planning board wanted us to stay out of.
I see. What is this thing?
It's sure, but it's basically like it's a steep hill coming down from the house where we put in the road.
Okay.
So there'd be a lot of excavation, and there's some big trees back there as well.
Mhm.
But I also want to add that the New York State came out with fire code in 2015 that addressed access pretty extensively. And it has certain requirements where you need 2 means of access. And it's pretty specific. And this product meets New York State fire code as far as providing access. I think, this is zoning code. It's worth mentioning that it doesn't meet New York State code as far as fire access.
With one single access point?
But it doesn't meet the village code?
Right.
Okay.
What is the village?
And
code?
I'd really encourage you guys, if you haven't walked the property, to look at it and look at what you're proposing in the back or the second access along the front. Just feel free to take a walk. I'll gladly meet you up there. I'm not trying to shortcut anything. I don't want you to think we're coming here trying to work around a zoning code or something. We've gone over this for months at both.
This is where we're putting on the building. This is nice and flat. And then we would have to hook around to get into here to Hasbrook. This is the corner of the house. And this is 10-foot contour here. So it's 10-foot drop over 20 feet or something like that. Yeah, so this is, it's not impossible. You could build anything.
Sure.
But it's not an easy road to build. And this is some big trees back there. The code you were asking about, it's the standards for senior citizen development in the village, specifically the rules that require us to. Perhaps we could get, the fire department kind of weigh in as well, if that helps as far as.
Well, they're gonna have to. I mean, that's a whole nother procedure. They're gonna have to put their approval on.
Yeah.
So that's, even if we said yes, they could say no.
Right.
I'm not feeling it. I'm not. I don't. This is where old people live. This should be as safe as possible. And if chaos breaks out there and you have one entrance and it's blocked because there's a fire truck there, that's you just created a really bad situation and you made it 10 times worse. I'm coming up with all sorts of weirdness about it. It's not something. This looks dangerous to me.
So as Cody was talking about before, if we were to, because that was one of our ideas, is that sidewalk going out to the road, that we made that wide enough so that that could be another access if for some reason the main access was blocked. Would that be something that would?
So you have these areas with crosses on those. I'm missing key on what that
Yeah,
is.
that's a sidewalk.
No,
No,
the
that's-
pluses. There's like pluses on it. Is that like considered wetland or
It's
swamp?
stormwater treatment.
So that's what, so you're gonna build that?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's not, okay. That's not etched in stone. All right.
Yeah, I guess I would. I personally, just speaking on looking at this, and I do need to do more looking around at the actual site. If there was the 12-foot continued and possibly spread so that if a large tree were to block this, it's not also blocking that, or whatever the case may be, a semi breaks down in front of it or whatever.
Car accident.
A car accident
Yeah,
at the entrance. Something as simple as just someone pulling in and they're, whatever the case may be. I know it's a 30-foot section, but it looks, without the scale, it looks like about another 30 foot to where the current sidewalk is. If it just on first look at this, it would put my mind at ease if it was able to spread them and have the two options, even if it is just for a small pickup truck, because I mean, I've carried people on a stretcher farther than that and it's not fun. And that's what I'm picturing. Is I'm picturing a reason that an ambulance can't get into there and an elderly person being carried from the unit back here, which I'm assuming the plan would be to allow them to get closer access to these situations using that service road in an emergency situation, which is probably why it's there for the most part. I am aware that that's probably going to be an aesthetic blemish, which is why I kind of want to, with this in mind, look at the location.
How wide is that right now? 14?
Well, this is 12, so I'm assuming 8, just by is the current section of the sidewalk that goes from the 12-foot proposed walking path, about 8. Yeah. So we literally would be talking, even if it was a situation where if it's a, like like a non, because this is,
Even if it was something that
Impervious, even if it
a barrier came down, that a truck could drive through, you know, like one of those arm things that you're not going to use it ever. It's just going to be used when there's an emergency. That would make me feel way more comfortable.
even
but-
if it, yeah, I mean, even if it
But-
still appeared to be part of the walkway, just with the curb
Yeah,
access.
or something like, you know, ball or whatever, like something that they could get through if that happened. And even, you know, just because that just looks, like I said, super
But
dangerous.
the issue is that if you were to just expand that to 12 foot, then this whole area is going to be pretty hideous. So there's possibly
They
an
have,
option.
but they have a lot of room. They
That's
they
what
can
I'm
move
saying.
this road.
This isn't
I
permanent.
mean,
If
this-
they were to come
yeah,
in
you
at a
can-
steeper angle to make that entrance, maybe,
And they have a lot of room here too. They can come straight to this.
yeah.
You know, there's nothing.
Yeah, you.
Well, I guess the question would be is if it's possible to make the entrance.
You
this
have room.
slightly-
The road could be, instead of being here. it
I
could be
think
over
right now
there.
they're just trying to figure out how to make it less ugly,
Okay.
but the idea, you could probably figure out how to make it less ugly.
Yeah, that's not hard.
And landscaping and
Yeah,
whatnot.
yeah.
But I think what we're saying is, and I'm in agreement with these two guys, that having two options for vehicles would make the most sense.
Okay.
From my perspective.
And I personally, I'm not saying that it needs to be a second 30 foot.
No,
with
if you could
the-
drive an ambulance
like,
there, I think
if-
that would be fine.
Yeah.
Or ideally a fire truck, but you know,
Yeah,
I would say at least an ambulance.
Easiest
So-
thing is move this over and make it wider. So they can just come on like that.
If I could, however the board decides to rule on this, I'd ask that you write a very articulate memo. I guess what I need, what I want to leave here with, if I could just tell you what I'd like to leave here with, is a path forward that sort of takes any wiggle out of, did we meet the second entrance? So if you're, in other words, if you're asking for a second emergency entrance, you know, is that a second entrance by code, or do you have to give me some type of relief that says, we're giving you a relief providing you do this?
No,
Yeah.
we're not at that stage yet.
Yeah,
We
if I
haven't
could
had a
just jump
public
in,
hearing yet, and that's not where we're not ready to do this.
just a couple things procedurally, and again, as you were noting, Sean, so because this was a type 1 action under seeker, the ZBA has to wait for the planning board to complete the environmental review before you can make
Yes.
any decision. So that's number one as far as making a decision. But also, you know, if you want to see an alternative, this other type of emergency access plan, but I think to Keith's point there, that is a possibility that the board has that discretion to grant conditional variances. So it could be a variance from this provision in some part. There's a second access that'll be emergency. That's an option that could happen, but not this evening.
Yeah.
Well, no, I'm sorry, I didn't mean for this evening, but so I would go back to the planning board, explore this option, then come back to you with some type of presentation. Is that how we would?
We have to have a public hearing first. And
Right.
we're just telling you where the problems that we see with your proposal. And then you
Gotcha.
can make a decision on what you want to do with that. We are not architects, we're not engineers. There are multiple ways to fix this problem. We've told you, you can get a gist of the room and see where we
Yep.
are. Well,
Okay.
right now, I'm very uncomfortable with this. So if you, we're not gonna design it for you, that's your job. I'm sorry, okay?
That's
That
okay.
was
Yeah,
probably
no,
not me either,
yeah.
but
No, I appreciate the input.
that's, we're just saying there's possibilities here and we're not.
But just as a point of process, Ashley, is it true that we have to have another public hearing on this variance?
You
Or is
already
it-
had the public hearing. You had that tonight. So
Yes.
now if they're going to be changing the design as a result of what happened, it's still under the same variance. So you won't need.
There are no
unless
more public
something-
hearings, right, okay.
Yeah, I mean, unless something, you know, if they proposed something completely different that required another variance or something like that, but you had your hearing already.
But we will have, at this point now, a chance to review a new proposal at some point. Is that right? But is that what we should
well, we
expect?
have to probably,
Yes, they'll have to return back to you.
Sorry, actually say that again?
So first, they have to finish the environmental review before the planning board, and it sounds like based on your discussions this evening, they're also going to be modifying the design somewhat to address the concerns that were raised by this board. So they'll be returning back to you after they make that submittal.
So what I think Keith is asking for is some maybe more specific clarity on what will be acceptable to this board in a redraft. Keith, am I understanding that if I'm out of line or not?
No, I'm just, we had to go back and forth to different boards. So I'm just curious about the process. I didn't mean to imply I was hoping for action tonight. But when we conclude, I just want to make sure, and I'm just saying this partly for the council here, that we have, what we need to go back to the planning board. I'm hearing what you're saying. I'm sort of hearing the discussions on what you'd like to see. I just want to make sure if we do that it kind of settles the question. And I'm learning that words are very important in the zoning laws and how they're written. So I just want to be very careful that when we conclude here, we have a definitive path forward with the planning board. Not tonight, but when the process is done. That's all.
The way that it's written, does it specify the dimensions of the second? It just says the
2
second.
means of vehicular access to village.
Yeah.
So essentially, if that was fixed, you wouldn't need.
That's what I was
approval.
thinking, yeah.
Yeah, you'd be done with us.
Not that I want to be in front of you guys, but
No, it's-
provided
You
to.
just do that.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm not sure if there's elsewhere though, if there's a minimum width in general for
Well, yeah.
the somewhere else perhaps in the village
Guys
code.
don't
So
Walk in a way.
Yeah.
I'm assuming based on the plans.
but that's something they could review too with the building inspector always and see if that would satisfy that provision.
Okay. Is there any comments on the other ask that we have on the height
Yeah.
relief?
I mean, it sounds like we're gonna end up with 2 means of vehicular access. That's fine, with possibly a recommendation from you on what that is. So I think proceeding with the height one, I think makes too much sense if we can, while we figure it out.
Yeah.
What the board can do this evening, if you wanted, you can't, of course, take action because you have to wait for the environmental review, but if you're in a position where you want to go through your 5 factors, the balancing test for the height variance, understanding the access is still perhaps going to be changed, but you can do your discussions. I could run through those 5 factors for you. And you can authorize the drafting of a decision for the height variance while the other is perhaps going to eliminate the need for a variance or would be returning for some modified variance. Is that something you wanted to do this evening?
Yeah. I'm
Yeah, I'm good with that. I'm
ready for
good with that. I'm ready.
So the first factor is whether an undesirable change would be produced in the character of the neighborhood or a detriment to nearby properties would be created by granting of the requested area variance.
The height? I don't see too much of a problem.
No.
No, we're good with that one.
Whether the benefit sought can be achieved by some other method feasible for the applicant to pursue that would not require an area variance.
They were relatively open coming forward that they're aesthetic, so yes, they could, but that doesn't mean it's not the right way to go forward with it. Obviously, it could be done without these, but it doesn't mean it shouldn't.
Right,
should be
But that
done.
would be made less.
Yeah. Okay.
Whether the area variances are substantial.
37.5 versus 30 is,
It's
I would say
substantial.
that's substantial.
It's substantial.
I've kind of spoke on this in the past before to where 37.5 as a flat roof seems very, very substantial to me, over 30. 37.5 as a peak of a gable doesn't. in comparison.
Yes,
Like, we're not talking about like a flat wall that's 7 foot higher, that's going to be, it's the peak of a building. What is the pitch of the roof, do you know? Off the top of your head?
The gables,
Yeah,
Well, it's not 37
I think it's 12,
and a
12.
half.
I believe the gables are at 10 on 12.
Right, yeah.
12, they're 12, 12, correct?
12.
Yeah.
No, the peaks of 2 gables, not the whole.
Yeah, that's what I'm. Yeah, so you're doing these end gables, so
Those 2 gables.
the rest of it is 34, and then those 2 high points are.
Right, yeah.
it's,
To, once
7
again,
feet
if
is-
the whole building is 7 feet,
Right.
I might be a different conversation, but it seems, for aesthetic purpose, it seems better.
The next factor is whether the requested area variances would have an adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood or district.
I don't think so.
And whether the difficulties are self-created,
We kind of covered
which
that.
typically whenever an applicant seeking to vary the zoning code, that factor usually is
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
against them, but it's not determinative under the.
Yeah, that kind of fell under number 2 as well, like, yeah, it's self-created, but possibly for good reasons, yeah.
So if you wanted to entertain a motion to authorize the zoning board attorney to draft a decision on the height variance application consistent with your discussions this evening,
Yes.
yes.
Do you make a motion?
I'd
or
like to-
someone could make that motion,
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So I will prepare that decision, and if the planning board completes seeker, which I believe they are probably going to be on the June agenda, I think, Andy, I'm trying to recall if there's a public hearing scheduled yet. I don't believe there is.
No.
But
No,
they,
they-
I think there was just some engineering comments I think we were waiting on for the planning board to proceed with the seeker process. So if that's done, then we could have this board consider the decision at your June meeting.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
Yep, that sounds good.
Okay.
And that's all from me on this, I guess. Actually, a question for Autumn. Has there been a response from the Ulster County Planning Board for the variance applications? Because that's something that'll also need to be received before they can act, or 30 days will have had to pass from the referral.
Nothing's been received yet. From Alice Planning.
Okay, if you could just confirm whatever day the referral was sent of the zoning board application to the planning board, when you have time this week, and then we could make sure they've had enough time to make a recommendation.
Thank you.
All right. That's it on this one for me.
So I move to close this discussion.
Yeah, you had already closed the public hearing, so no need to do
Okay,
any type of motion on this.
Okay.
You could just move on to the public hearing for ZB 2201, which you don't need a motion to open because that was opened at the March meeting. So
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
all right, so this is, we'd like to have, so are we gonna have an open public hearing on 123 Main Street? Yes, so let's,
It's already-
it's current.
oh, it's current. Okay, so does anyone want to talk about 123 Main Street? Are you the lawyer, or are you the public hearing person, or are you just?
So Charlie got an attorney for the applicant. I thought it would be best if we gave a presentation so members of the public could hear it in case they didn't at the last meeting, and then you could open up the floor,
Okay.
but certainly your decision.
We would, yes,
Corey.
Yes.
I'm the village attorney, your attorney. after the presentation from the appellant here, we would also like to address some remarks to the board, but certainly happy to listen to their presentation if that's what you want to do.
Whatever, yeah, everyone,
Is there anyone not tied to it directly that's from the public?
yes, okay, so why don't you guys talk first and then we can.
Would you like to talk now, or would you like to hear the discussion first?
Well, what I have to say is. I live on Prospect Street and my property borders 123, which has caused many problems for many, many years. I know it's in the owner. But I just wanted to tell the village that I appreciate its vigilance about the property because of all the problems in the past. The parcel had been transformed from a wetland to just sort of this empty lot. It had cattails, a woodland with trees, a stream with salamanders. And then one day, all the trees were cut, gone. Then fill dirt was brought on trucks down Prospect Street in the middle of the night to fill the 1 acre, raising it by 10 feet. So there had been many stop work orders that were ignored. So I just do not want to see anything like that happen. This vigilance in this matter.
Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. And what's your name?
Christine Marmo, I own a house on Prospect Street as well. And we've been, Allison and I and other neighbors have been watching what was happening with this lot in the back. So we're here to hear what the new proposal is. That, well, that we're on top of it, and also appreciate the village's diligence with this, because many, many things have gone on back there that should never have happened.
Just from my knowledge, could you give me the approximate dates of the?
2009, I have some stop work orders from them, if you like them.
I just want to know the approximate.
Yeah, 2009, but it went on for.
So 2009 is when those stop work orders were happening.
And after that,
And after that.
I have so much. And at that time, it was deemed to be slightly less than 1 acre, like 0.98 acres. If it were over 1 acre, then DEC would have some purview over it. But the owner at the time had the engineers do the site map. So the deeming of 0.98 was by the owners of the lot, so we really don't know. Yes, but I hope it was some independent. Just to give you a little history of the shenanigans that have gone on back there.
I appreciate the perspective, thank you.
Okay. All right, you're up.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Charlie Golly. I'm from Whiteman, Ulster, and I'm a land use counsel for the applicant. Here this evening with, I should say, the appellant, John Joseph, who is the current property owner, who has recently purchased the property. Here to appeal a notice of violation and a stop work order, which states that a building permit and site plan review was required for some work that was done on the property. The work that was being done on the property was test pits to evaluate fill. That was correctly stated, that was brought onto the site years ago. Test pits need to be done to figure out what that fill is, how deep it is, and so forth. There was also maintenance of an existing drainage channels that were not functioning. So again, that's on-site investigations to try to get those channels functioning again So Mr. Joseph can see what the drainage flows on the site are. So when it does come time for a project to be proposed, he has those necessary environmentals studied so he can properly assess the environmental impacts. The prior owner is correct, it did not maintain his property correctly. There was fill that was placed on the property. Drainage was not maintained. We'd also like to point out that the drainage has increased recently because there's new developments, both at front Main Street, there's a project with a deck in the back. And so drainage is now being routed from that project onto the project site or onto this property. And then in the rear, I suppose it would be the northwest corner, there's additional work that's being done on another adjacent property, and that stormwater is being directed onto Mr. Joseph's property. Both, I'm assuming, permitted by the building department, but nevertheless, that drainage is coming onto our site without any proper easements or anything. So alleged violation number one is that this site investigation and related clearing needs a building permit. You have a letter from my office saying that a building permit is only needed if the structure is being erected and needs to comply with the New York State Building Code. Here, there is no structure. I think to the next allegation that a site plan is needed, I'd like to point out a few things. The site plan section of the zoning code, it's 212-23, specifically exempts from site plan review soil borings, test pits, and other disturbances incidental to engineering and environmental studies. So here we had test pits, we had maintenance of clogged drainage channels to try to study what the soil is and what the drainage is on the site, so the developer can then assess what could be done on the site in the future. I looked at the site plan review requirements again today, and I'll quote right from the code. It says, no building permit shall be issued, no structure or use shall be established, and no lot, parcel, or site preparations, comma, including clearing vegetation, grading, filling, excavating in excess of 30 cubic yards, or altering drainage shall be undertaken without a site plan. So we feel that a site plan isn't required for the maintenance and investigations that were done on the sites for a few reasons. One, there's no development right now planned for the property. I understand there are rumors in the village that there is going to be a development on the property, and that may be the case. But the applicant can't properly assess what that development is going to be or properly conduct and finish site plans for that development without understanding how the drainage works, without understanding what that fill is that prior owner put on the site. Environmental investigations and test pits are exempt by the code. The brush clearing, so John will go through this on an aerial we have, was all along a very steep slope. So that brush clearing was not done in furtherance of any site preparation for development, but it was to further the investigation and the maintenance of the drainage. So we could unclog it, see how the drainage works, because it's kind of a hodgepodge of drainage systems back there. And lastly, there was no altering of the drainage. It was only maintenance and unclogging of existing drainage channels to see which way they flow. So we're asking the Zoning Board of Appeals to make an interpretation that the site work that was done did not require a building permit, did not require site plan review. And hopefully the applicant can finish what the investigations he has done. And a few things to point out in the notice of violation itself. There's no statement in the notice of violation that the clearing and the disturbance and test pits was done for any site preparation. There was no indication in the notice of violation that there was any alteration of any drainage. And lastly, I'd like to point out that a property owner by the code is allowed to excavate 30 cubic yards on their property without site plan review. All that was done here was just clearing of some brush so they could get down the slope to the drainage channels, clean up the drainage channels, and then the test pits. So far more is actually allowed under the code without site plan review. If someone came onto the site and excavated 30 cubic yards, wasn't done, not proposed to be done, but under this code, it still could be done without site plan review. So really, it was minor maintenance and investigative work that was done. And I'll hand it over to John to kind of walk you through what he conducted as he was on the
Okay.
site.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
The date the test pits were dug, what date is that?
So in our submission that was back in February, we submitted a letter from the engineer, Gary Medenbach, with the test pit locations. And it says the following are the results from 3 test pits that were excavated in my inspection on November 23rd, 2021.
And when did you buy the property?
January 6th, 2022.
So you cleaned drainage and fixed drainage on a property you didn't own, and you cut down trees and did a whole bunch of maintenance work on a piece of property you didn't know. What was your plan if the deal didn't go through to recoup your money that you just spent?
I would not have covered it. It's a normal due diligence process before you acquire a piece of property is to do investigative work. Because if I had come up with something that the fill was uncontrolled or in poor condition, or this drainage was groundwater that I had to manage, all of these things would have impacted my decision to buy the property.
The other question I have is, so how big were the test pits you dug? Because there's at least 10 feet of fill there.
No, there's 6 to 8 feet in the 3 spots that we've done.
The letter from Mr. Medenbach says the depth of the fill ranges from 5 to 8 feet.
Okay.
No water or rock was found.
So if I can talk about this for a minute, so lady in the back is correct. You can see from the toe of the slope to the top of this hill where it was mowed, that was all the fill that was brought in. What we did was we cleared from the mowed area down to the toe of the slope to get a better to see a profile of what that was. The drainage outlet, and by the way, none of these people have any drainage easements or rights. Okay, there are none. I can only come up. So this. Look at. Current drainage, it comes out under this guy's parking lot. It all goes this way. This gentleman has done a fabulous job there. Someone has, I guess, the site plan approval. He is draining all his roof, his parking lot, into 2 pipes that discharge into this. So that's ultimately going to be increasing the flow that comes down through here. The mayor has a small pipe that discharges into it. This discharge comes from actually over here somewhere. And then this, when Mr. Toscani owned it, he rerouted when he filled it. It used to go, from what I understand, over to here. And discharge into a little pipe here. This pipe is I'm not sure where it goes. I'm gonna have to discover that. But someone cut a hole in the side, literally cut a hole in the side of this thing like it's a tin can. And what happens here is when you get a lot of rain, this fills up because it's not maintained. It's all full of brush and debris and clogs the street, and then overflows onto this property. So our intention, once we figure all of this out, is to correct this, culvert this, but I need to know how much water is flowing through here, and I just can't. We cleared a lot of broken down brush. These trees through storm damage had been branches this high. So I sent the guys in to clear down to the thing, clear all the broken brush out of here, and clear the hill so that we could get in here with the machine, dig the ditch out, and maintain it. So, build all the broken branches, get everything out of it. I can show you pictures of it. There's all kinds of debris in there now that broke off through the last winter. This is just to see the profile of what this fill is. Now, from what I understand, it came from Woodlands Pond. And it's, like I said, 5 to 8 feet. But we don't know that much about it. It's over here.
There was some clearing in the area behind the semi trailer as well.
There was some standing dead over there that we
Okay.
clipped down.
I
And then
saw some mulch.
we blew up the chips there.
Yeah.
On that. So along here, we only went to the top of the film. We did not go any further. So this is the drainage pipe that comes out from here. This is a little culvert and a fence. This is the property line. This was all backed up, silted shut. And we cleared it so that this could flow again. Mr. Santiago called and said it was backing up because of this. This was blocked. So we cleared it down to here. But if you continue on down a little further from this, it's silted shut. This is what it looks like. All broken down branches and stuff in there that needs to be cleaned and maintained. A little further down, it starts to get a little better. But this is not the way it should. You need to shape it, clean it, get all this brush out of here and maintain it. And this is what it flows into. Well, it's unfortunate that the last owner did not maintain this from the time he did this work, but we have a different standard of care. And we just want to go in there, maintain the property. We ultimately will figure out, we are going to develop it. I don't know what we're going to do with it just yet, but we're in the process of trying to figure that out. It's gonna take time.
Do you have some ideas?
Well, Jay's here, he owns the Hampton here in town, so he is one of the opportunities that is available to us. But we don't know how to manage the drainage or what we have to manage. Like, I can't just cut these people off. I gotta manage their water somehow.
No, you don't. You could build a wall there and block the water in and backflow it on them and it'd be completely legal. You do not have to maintain someone else's drainage or downhill. You can totally do that. There's no, I don't have to maintain drainage for someone else. That's ridiculous. It's an empty lot. You could leave it
Well,
overflowing and they're in trouble and it's their problem. I mean, you're very generous. I mean, 3 months before you buy a property, you're concerned about your neighbor's drainage. It's really,
it's not,
but you don't have to do that.
well,
It's been like that for 20 years. So
it's
that's,
called an easement by prescription. If you've been openly and notoriously doing this, like adverse possession, okay? It's an easement by prescription. I've been doing it. He can make a claim against me.
you didn't own the property when you fixed it. You couldn't make any claim.
I didn't fix anything. Look at it.
There's nothing to be, if you don't own the property, you're not liable for a piece of property you didn't own.
But I was planning on buying, and I still needed to fix it.
Yeah, and your argument would make really a lot more sense if you had the property at the point, but to say that you're worried about getting sued over a piece of property that you don't own it yet is ridiculous.
That's
That doesn't
not what
make
I'm
any
saying.
sense.
So if I may, and
That argument's really weird.
That's
so
not what I'm
if I
saying.
may, this is kind of, what I see all the time. I routinely represent developers. Before you close on a property, you're in a contract to purchase the property and you want to do as much due diligence on that property before you close on it. You want to find what the fill is. You want to see what the drainage issues are. With the developments that have occurred that are contributing to the drainage, certainly they're not, the cause of what's going on here. The property owner who's going to develop the property needs to understand how that stormwater is going to affect the stormwater once they develop their property. And to say that if we could just build a wall and let their property flood, that's not fixing the problem. That's creating a larger problem. And I think there's a reason the zoning code allows this type of activity without site plan approval so that those larger problems don't happen. Right? There's the ability to maintain drainage channels. There's your ability to maintain your own property. And it's so that drainage problems like the one that would occur if we built the wall don't happen.
Is it customary in your experience for people to do a wind survey on their back property?
Sure, anything, there's, depending on the contract you're in, you either have a very short due diligence period or you have a very long due diligence period. And it's what level of risk do you want when you purchase the property? So certainly it's, title report, a survey, all of that.
So did you do a title report and survey? I got some information that this was not surveyed. So did you have a professional survey done?
95 acres.
Okay.
These are the survey.
Yeah.
And it came out for them at 0.98.
No, this whole parcel
Yeah.
is almost 2 acres.
If you go to
This, but whatever he did was limited maybe to this. So he might have only been disturbing 0.98 acres.
But if this is almost 2 acres, then isn't this under the DEC or?
So what she was referencing is when you disturb, when you not just cut down brush, not just cut down trees, but
Okay,
when you physically compact the earth or disturb it, then you disturb more than an acre, you need a stormwater pollution prevention plan and coverage under the DEC Stevens program.
We got that.
Right.
And the affected area of where I cleared to get down the brush is also under an acre, so it doesn't require any DEC permit.
yeah.
Any other questions? I'm good.
That's one of these.
Before we go, the council for the ZB. Website.
Ashley, do you want to ask any questions?
So I just had one comment, which I had mentioned this to the applicant's attorney when we had spoke. I think it was in March perhaps, but I don't know that it was discussed at that meeting because I was not there. Rick had covered it for me. But as you know, this appeal, it's from two separate violations or determinations. One concerns the building permit requirement under Chapter 86, and one is the site plan requirement under Chapter 212. So the building permit requirement under Chapter 86, that's not a determination that can be appealed to this board. This board can only review determinations that were issued involving the zoning code. So what's before you and what you can and should be considering is limited to that site plan determination and whether a site plan was required for what is alleged to be done in the violation.
So I agree with your counsel that the provision related to building permits and the notice violation did reference Chapter 86. However, a similar provision that talks about the requirements of building codes is actually in the zoning code as well. It's 212 Article 7. So it's 212-63. So that also talks about requirements of building codes, and that is in the zoning code.
Was that in the notice of violation? Or is the notice of violation limited to Chapter 86 and to the 212-23?
So I would submit that it's within this board's jurisdiction to make a determination under 212-63, which is in the zoning code.
Well, if there wasn't a determination that was made originally under that section, I don't see how that could be,
So, yeah.
it can't be appealed to there's nothing that could be appealed to the zoning board.
Sure, if I could just finish and then I'll be happy to take any questions. So zoning code 212-63 talks about building permits. It's within the zoning code. This board has the ability to make a determination that a building permit is not required under 212-63, which is in the zoning code. It does not necessarily have to be in the notice of violation. It is your authority on any appeal to interpret the zoning code. That provision is in the zoning code. You could appeal, you could make an interpretation on that section, which is similar in nature.
So again, I'm looking at the notice of violation. It does not allege or determine that 212-63 was violated. So what was determined and what was appealed to this board is that a building permit under Chapter 86, and I don't know whether their language tracks the same or not, but it is a different position, but understand your argument on that. But my advice to the board remains the same.
It's
Hello.
Hello.
Again, I'm Will Frank, I'm the village attorney. You know Corey, of course. So we're just gonna make some remarks. We're not gonna take up too much time here, I don't believe. But go ahead, Corey.
Hey,
Corey,
Corey.
go and I'll make a few remarks.
A little different light down here, you were talking about buildings and whatnot. I want to start off with thanking you for listening to us and allowing me to add narrative to this conversation. Really quick, a lot of what I do on the other side of not building construction is code enforcement. It's very complaint driven. My job is literally to protect the community, make sure that I'm doing my due diligence on behalf of our code and making sure that the code are being followed and the interpretations that fall within are usually, coincide with a lot of the investigations that I perform. So here we are now, we received some complaints regarding work being done on a property. This happens all the time. Typically, I'll go out, I'll investigate, I will I'll visit the site. If there's someone there, I can talk to them. I get more information from the complainants themselves, but it's very much investigative in nature. Like, I don't really know what's going on. So in this case, what you're looking at, you're looking at stop work order and notice of violation. I have a little statement prepared that I'm going to read just so I make sure that I get all lines back straight. But I just want to open up with that just so you know this is part of my job, what I'm doing here. It is more of an investigation driven by complaints. All right. So I've also had a chance, obviously, to see the documentation that was submitted. So some of what I'm going to say is going to be somewhat of a response to some of that. So bear with me, it's a little bit long. Basically, what I'm saying here is, if all the applicant wants to do is to do test pits, then they're free to do so. The stop work order does not prohibit such work. I actually state in the stop work order that, in quote, all work that requires a permit or board approvals must stop until a permit or approval for such work has been issued. Any permitted work shall be performed safely. Basically, the test pits do not require approval in our code. It was actually stated by the applicant. What I'm saying here is what I noticed here in my investigation is I'm saying that the clearing of vegetation is prohibited and protected by the village code section 212.23, which does state as follows: in accordance with 725A of village law, no building permit shall be issued, no structure or use shall be established, and no lot, parcel, or site preparations, including clearing vegetation, grading, filling, excavating in excess of 30 cubic yards, or altering drainage shall be undertaken except in conformity with an approved site plan for the lot, and no certificate of occupancy for such structure or use shall be issued until all the requirements for such a plan and any conditions attached thereto have been met. So it further goes to say limited short-term site investigations such as surveys, soil boring, test pits, and other disturbances incidental to engineering and environmental studies are exempt from the requirement for an approved site plan. Continued conformity with such a plan and such requirements shall be a condition of the continued validity of any certificate of occupancy issued. Revisions of such plans shall be subject to the same approval procedure. So I just wanted to note that's why when writing the stop work order, I wrote it in such a way to kind of answer. So this stop work order is clear that we're talking about land clearing, not test pits. I didn't say anything about test pits in the stop work order itself. This is the concern of the investigation. Also, as one of the Village of New Paltz stormwater management officers, I have concerns for the effect that this land clearing may have had on the installed stormwater management systems by way of drainage soils that we all just had a chance to look at. Land development activities and associated increases in site impervious cover often alter the hydraulic response of local watersheds and increase stormwater runoff rates and volumes, flooding, stream channel erosion, or sediment transport and deposition. So basically, as part of the stormwater management, I'm required to do so many inspections of all the outfalls at its very end terminating point. So I actually track those back. So I've actually been to this area quite a bit. It just, when something is altered or changed, the point I'm making is my concern is that the amount of land clearing that I noticed with what was done clearing brush, trees were taken down, that could alter stormwater runoff in a way that could actually increase flooding to the drainage system that we are noting has not been maintained for some time. And then as for the amount of area cleared, I use the Ulster County parcel viewer. I base my estimate on the information when we're talking about the size of size of the lot that had actually been cleared, which is I actually use Ulster County parcel viewer for that. Furthermore, and most relevant, looking at the soil test hole site plan that was submitted by the applicant, there were a significant amount of trees and vegetation on the entire perimeter of the parcel containing test hole number 1. I feel it was completely unnecessary to remove all of the trees and vegetation just to dig one hole in the middle of the property. Furthermore, you don't need to clear an entire lot to perform the tests. A path can be created that is large enough for the machine to do its work, and that's really it. Otherwise, anyone could just clear their lot and claim they were digging test pits to study soil compaction. But when nothing is done with that property, eventually, we end up with a cleared lot. We have loss of trees, loss of animal habitats, an increased impervious surface, and then most notably, we have buffers to neighboring residential properties that have now been removed. I do real quickly want to identify the part of the property that we're talking about, because I did notice that most of the conversation has been about the part of the property that I did not issue a stop work order for. There's actually 2 parcels here on the lot. They are very big, and together they are about 2 acres. I felt in my investigation, the area that had the most removal of the trees was what was affected. I should issue a stop work order for. I have a bunch actually. I can hand out. I have 2 actually. I'm just gonna do it for and these out so you can see. So wrong. So it's the smaller, we'll call it northwestern portion of the property. We can see I've outlined in red the area that I consider land clearing. This is actually a Ulster County parcel viewer overlay from pre-land clearing. I mean, the fact of the matter for me is upon it, I just don't know what's going on. My job is literally to find out what's going on. If I see something that I initially think there's land clearing operations or land development, I don't know. This is what building inspectors do. They issue a stop work order so they can continue the investigation. Typically that generates a conversation where you can explain what's going on, you can have that conversation. That's why we issued a notice of violation. That kind of furthers it to just basically say, without knowing what's going on, this is what, normally we feel someone would have to do in this situation. And here we are.
Questions for Cory?
It was mentioned maybe 1 or 2 meetings ago about diameter as far as in the definition of land clearing in our code. Do you know?
That I believe is in reference to the tree portion of the code.
Yeah.
We're talking about shade tree and jurisdiction.
Yeah.
That is referencing like the size of the trees that being taken down themselves. So that jurisdiction is separate than this.
Okay.
That's not land clearing to me. This is just I guess in my reasonable and prudent opinion, I felt that the land clearing that had been done was more associated with something being developed. I didn't know what, something being developed.
I was just caught off guard by
nothing to do
the
with that.
Yeah,
number
you asking about the actual diameter of the trees themselves?
Well, I was surprised when I read the first report from the attorney about, describing his brush. And then when I walked the property, there's a dozen, or more.
I counted 100.
Stump
I counted
bases.
over 100 trees cut down.
But I mean, stump bases in the 8 to 10.
Yeah, but I was going to address that in my comments, but I'll address it now. That speaks to chapter 190, the diameters in chapter 191 of the code, which is specifically trees. There's nothing, and that it says in the definitions there, it's specific to that chapter. There's nothing in chapter 212 of the zoning code that even defines tree.
Okay.
So
I guess it just caught me off guard because initially when we were talking about it and I was getting the view from from the attorney, and then when I looked closer at the detail, what the story I was given, it,
Is there somebody else who enforces the tree diameter cutting down, or,
There's a shade,
Well,
the
the
village
shade
tree issue.
but is there somebody who enforces that?
The enforcement will come from my office. the building department.
So do you enforce the shade tree commission's rules?
Yes, because the code's within the village code.
Okay,
I believe the code actually establishes that.
okay, but that didn't apply here.
Generally, those shade tree commission get involved if the trees were within 20 feet of a public right of way or street and things like that.
I got you.
That's when the shade tree commission has more of a function.
I got you. Were you gonna
Not
say-
on the shade tree.
Oh, okay.
It is within 20 feet. That they have to the applicant and the applicant.
Okay.
And he already does.
Okay, understood.
It doesn't apply.
Yeah.
I know it well. It's tricky that way.
Okay.
I said, I know it well.
Yeah, I was
And you're,
just-
now you're the
I was just
stormwater, you're
clarifying.
the stormwater person.
Yeah.
In your opinion, as a stormwater person, when you cut down vegetation, does that increase the likelihood that there's gonna be an increase in drainage problems, and it's also going to cause things to get silted up because there's no more trees holding back the soil?
That's really more of a question for the village engineer, who deals with this to answer, but in my opinion, having gone through the training, done the stormwater for a while now. Change the landscape of anything, it's gonna change the way something drains off the property. You're changing the way that it's absorbing into the ground, you're changing the way that it diverts off the ground. A lot of what my job to do in the stormwater aspect of it is tracking some of that, because we are under order by the DEC to be a MS4 community, to make sure that certain construction projects will say upstream of an outfall are following rules that the village has. For instance, we have the SWIP, but that only applies to certain size developments. The village has, because we're an MS4 community, we do deal with, we actually have our own stormwater soil and erosion plans that we require for certain types of land development projects. But the idea is yes, anything, there's a huge, like, quote unquote trickle effect, right? You do anything, it affects the whole property something like that. So just in my experience, any change could literally do anything, but as far as actually calculating and coming with numbers, statistics on how that works, that would be a question to the village engineer.
We interrupted you and you were about to do something.
So I was just gonna ask if anybody had any more questions for Corey, or eventually did before I just said a few remarks. What do you want to do?
Ashley, you have any questions for Corey?
No, I do not.
Okay, well, I'm just gonna make a few remarks, if that's okay. Characterized as minimal brush clearing in their appeal to this board and the correspondence from the council was the clearing of the entire perimeter of the property. Certainly more than was necessary in the village's opinion to dig one test pit in the middle of this affected parcel. There was only one test pit dug in this parcel, which is subject to the stop work order. That we believe did not necessitate the clearing of the entire perimeter, as Corey mentioned in this drawing. I understand the argument that they had to clear everything to check the drainage, but we also respectfully disagree with that plan of attack, if you will. Where it said clear brush and small trees on the perimeter is routine maintenance. There wasn't the need to do all of it at this time. They dug their pits, and I'll get to that in a minute. We covered chapter 191, so I don't have to repeat that. Now, the question here, the clearing and the test pits have already been completed. Our understanding from reading the correspondence is that there was a plan to do 7 test pits. I believe that's mentioned there. 3 were dug in November. The property was purchased apparently in January. There was nothing, as far as the village is concerned, preventing them under the stop work order from continuing to do test pits, because those are exempted from 212.23 of the code. So they're asking that the stop work order be lifted you can go ahead and dig your test pits now, the entire property's been cleared. The question becomes, what else is going to be done, and that hasn't been discussed with respect to the lifting of a stop work order, unless it's more site preparation for a project which is yet to be defined. Whether it's a hotel, whether it's something else, that's the subject of a planning board application when the time comes. They can go ahead and dig the other 4 test pits now, and speaking for the building department, that's not a problem. Dated February 28th, states on page 5, the appellate asks that the ZBA wholly reverse the violation and allow the applicant to proceed with its needed environmental testing. I interpret that, unless I'm correct, to mean the test pits. We're not arguing about the test pits. It sounds like a broken record. Okay. However, that doesn't give the appellant a license to continue clearing the entire property in the opinion of the village. Interestingly, the appellant argues in his submission that the ZBA has no authority to read into the code a maximum amount of clearing that's incidental to test pits or anything else. However, the appellant has no problem offering to let the board use its discretion when it suits its purposes to determine that his tree and brush clearing was quote unquote routine maintenance. Routine maintenance is not defined anywhere in the code. We submit that routine maintenance doesn't mean wiping out all the trees, the live trees, situated on the perimeter of the property, particularly when you're digging test pits in the middle of the property. The report from Medenbach's office gives us the diagram of the first 3 pits that were dug. And in the affected property, it's pretty much right in the middle. Okay. There's been no presentation of the location of where the other pits are going to be dug. If they're going to do the other 4, maybe they will, and that's fine. But we don't believe it was necessary to clear the entire property right now. It's clear. So we submit, other than saying, this board and your attorney, I'm not telling you you're anything you don't know and your attorney hasn't already told you, you have discretion in interpreting the ordinance. Okay. That's your discretion. Okay. It's fact-based in every case, and particularly here, it'll be up to you. Either you're going to say, nah, you don't need a stop work order anymore, so go ahead, or you're going to sustain the stop work order. Under those circumstances, additional pits can be done. And that's pretty much all I have to say. I don't want to belabor this. I think there's been enough factual presentation and argument from everyone. Unless the board or council has any question for me, we're good to go.
Yeah. Ashley? Ashley, any questions?
Nothing for me.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I would just request that we either have an opportunity to respond in writing, or I could say a few kind of rebuttal comments here and straighten out some inaccuracies that are stated.
If there's going to be a response in writing from Mr. Gottlieb, I have no objection, as long as I can respond to that as well if necessary.
So let me just say one thing before we get too deep into the weeds here. Told you why we cleared to the south of the field, so we can see the cross section of what's there. The only thing I need to do is if there's additional test pits, where some of them are going to be on this slope, okay, and take out all this broken down stuff, clear this drainage ditch, okay, and maintain it. That's my intent. We're not cutting any more trees.
You can't cut any more trees, they're all cut down.
No, there's a lot laying in this ditch that all new stuff that came down this year. So there's gonna have to be a guy with a chipper there to clear this out so I can properly maintain. And if I'm not allowed to do that, that's all I'm planning on doing. I'm gonna maintain the slopes, I'm gonna investigate along the slopes, I'm gonna clear the drainage ditch and maintain the drainage ditch. That's all
Why don't you
I'm
get a permit
for?
for doing the work? That's,
I gotta get a building permit. I'm building it. What permit would you issue?
Talk to your lawyer. He'll tell you. You
We've
can probably figure out.
identified-
There's probably a legal way for you to do the work you want to do. Are you saying you can't do work on your property because we're stopping you from doing the work that
You
you
lie? Yeah.
So we've laid out in our arguments that no permits are identified anywhere in the village code for the work that was conducted. So one can't be fabricated to make. So one of the things that was interesting is when you read the
Okay,
requirements.
no, we're gonna stop. You've made this point three meetings in a row. You keep saying the same thing over and over again. If you have something new to add, we would love to hear it in writing. That would be wonderful. Okay, but we're not gonna rehash this. You guys had your time to speak. They had their time to speak.
We can sort of, he's the code enforcement officer. What permit would I need to do what I want to do? Well, if I came, what permit would you issue?
We're not answering questions.
If I could jump in here as well, because we're getting a little off track here. So what's before the board again is the determination that what was done was in violation of the requirement to have a site plan. So that's what's been appealed. That's what's within this court's jurisdiction to rule on. So whether there's something additional things that want to be done on the property, if that needs a permit, if it doesn't, that's something the applicant can speak to the building department about outside of this board, because it doesn't, concern what decision this board is reviewing tonight.
Right, so we're just evaluating, did they or did they not need a site plan for the work that was conducted? Was that?
Exactly. So the determination that it was a violation to do what they had done without a site plan, understanding the exemptions for test pits and all of that. And I would remind you that the public hearing is still open. So if there's nothing else that you want, if there's no more members of the public that are going to speak, I know there is a request is there still a request to respond from the applicant's attorney to respond? Charlie, did you have anything to add?
Yes, we would like to respond in writing to clarify.
Okay, so
Well, we'd like an opportunity to respond if necessary.
totally acceptable. Okay, so I think we can close the public hearing.
We can
Okay.
close the public hearing, but acknowledge that you will receive, I don't know if you want to set a time frame for when you will receive a follow-up from both the applicant and the
Can I
village.
just ask another question before we go through the process? But what is it that you want to do now that you can't do currently?
Well, I've got in violation of, they clarify that I can continue the test bits on the stop. That's all. The other violation is starting construction without the site plan. I still need to do the work I need to do. I need to get all these broken down branches, get the stuff out of the ditch that I showed you, get the shopping cart out, do all that. Machine, tranche down now. And all that. It's gonna require some chipping, it's gonna require some equipment. I can't do that because you have me in violation. You were telling me I need a site plan approval to do that. So unless you rescind that, I can't do any more on this property, other than some.
Is that your understanding as well, that no further maintenance of drainage ditches is permissible at this time?
Yeah, I just want to make a point. What I think, what just needs to be said here, is going back to the whole reason for the stop work order. And the reason why we're saying it needed site plan review is because we did not know what was going on with the site. What it had looked like was somebody was clearing the site to prep for something. What do? You ask questions. You try to ask questions. And the first thing you have to do as a municipal code officer is you have to stop the work before any more, if there is damage being done, to be done. And then that can be clarified out later. So the whole point of the stop work order is really to find out what's going on. And through that, we're saying, hey, we identified land clearing. We need you to go get a building permit for a structure if you're building one. We need you to get site plan approval if you're planning on developing something there. To be perfectly honest with you, a a lot of that is done so that a phone call and a conversation can be had and say, no, I'm not doing this, or I don't know what I'm doing, or this is the investigation that I'm doing. That didn't happen. We're here. I mean, a lot of that, it says right at the bottom of the notice of violation, call if you feel that this was issued in error.
So why didn't you call for it?
I saw him on site. And I told him this is done in error. I said, and he said, I need to come and, I should apply for site plan approval. I'm like, I'm not doing it. I just need to know what I'm doing. So, look, we're here now. It's really up to the board to decide whether I've violated anything, if I needed a permit to do any of this. And if the answer is no, lift the violation, let me continue. You can leave the stop work order in place, and I will do the test pits under the stop work order. And I'll clear this with all the broken down stuff that's left, and I'll clear the ditch.
What's the essence, so what do you ask to be rescinded then? You're saying you need to stop work, or you're giving them as an option?
Well, the only option is they have, the stop work order, right?
The attorney for the board will advise you guys what you can and cannot.
What I would recommend is potentially, if you lift the stop work order, and then there's a determination from the zoning board of appeals that sets forth the work that can be done, then that's kind of your new decisional document, right? So can continue with the test pits, that's not an issue. Continue with the maintenance and repair drainage or clearing out the drainage. I think you as a board can put that in your decision, right? So then we have a decisional document that guides the property owner as to what work he can do in furtherance of his maintenance and investigations.
Again, that's, if they want to suggest that, we'll take the advice of your counsel on that.
Stanley?
So is there still going to be, I'm sorry, go ahead. No, I mean, if just, I don't know, planning on writing to the, putting something in writing or not?
Yeah, we're gonna put something in writing, and I think, in the writing that I do, I think I would suggest language that might go in such a decisional document, and of course, it's up to this board to determine and up to your council for guidance.
I guess we're going in circles, and I apologize, but so you wanted to do some clearing for maintenance and then test pits to determine what you could do to this property. That bank is clear. Whether or not there's a shopping cart, like you can tell what's happening with the drainage. We know it needs fixed. That's not what's up for debate here. I guess I'm confused why you can't, in the current state, make a decision about what you want to do with the property.
Because you know enough about the subsurface conditions. So you got to.
But you still are allowed to dig 4 more test pits.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
I think as many as.
So
No,
I
listen, now that we've clarified that here this evening,
okay.
we can proceed.
Okay.
But what I can't do is really any more of cleaning the ditch or any of that, because if I'm correct, that requires, the determination is that requires site plan approval.
And you feel that that's keeping you from determining what you're going to be able to do on this
No,
property?
I can do the test pits.
Okay.
That'll solve that end.
So
But
it's,
I won't be able to maintain the ditch.
So-
I can't maintain
Okay. And until there's a site plan, which you could submit once you determine
it,
the
which could be
information.
6 months of time.
Yeah. But I'm just trying to make sure that it's not actually stopping your progress to decide what you're doing with the property.
No, that, now based on this evening, that is not, what it is stopping is the further maintenance, because we need the site plan issue. Whether or not I committed any violations by not having site plan approval to do the maintenance.
Okay.
That's the issue.
Just a point of clarification, the stop work order did not prohibit additional test pits, and it was specifically spelled out in there, the exceptions to.
Yeah.
yeah, we understand.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm just trying to figure out what the holdup
If
is.
we misunderstood that, I apologize for that. Okay, and we will proceed with that.
So at the same token, the village and our position is the whole point of this is we're trying to prevent unnecessary land clearing.
Yeah.
You know, whether you can maintain a drainage ditch? Does it need to be a machine? Can you have that, that's a conversation I could have had with, the developer. The idea here, and the reason again for site plan is so we know what's going on, we don't want anything else that's removing things that are naturally there.
Yes.
Most of it will be within the buffer.
Well, things
Yes.
that are of value to our community.
I just wanted to make our position.
Would it hurt to inform the building inspector before you do stuff to the property and check and make sure it's okay, and then we don't have to have these weird meetings? I think that would solve the problem 100% of the time. Now, we obviously cannot go back in the past, but we would think going in the future that anytime you were going to do any work on the property, you would call and be like, hey, heads up, this is what I'm doing. Does that sound like a rational kind of thing?
Like I said, there's no notice provision in your code. All right, so there's no notice provision, so we can go do that going forward, but there's no notice provision in your code that would require me to do this.
Okay, and then you gave me the answer I needed to know.
No, I
Thank
said.
you.
I
Stannis, do you
said
have
we can do that going forward, but there is no notice provision in the code. I'm just
Okay.
stating for the record.
I agree with you.
So,
Stannis? Yes.
Hi, I'm Stone Weisberg. I'm the village board's liaison to this board. I have a question. You guys can tell me if it's the right place or time to discuss it. I'm concerned for what has been removed, and if there will be, who decides what they have to do to remediate this and what needs to be planted and what is protected. Because I'm concerned about what was removed and what we're gonna be able to do about that.
Ashley, you want to take that one or you want me to answer it?
I couldn't quite hear the question. Are you able to repeat it?
Yeah, please repeat it.
My question was, what the village can do about everything that was illegally cleared already. I would like to know how we can be made whole and what channel that has to go through, for the buffer, for the vegetation that was there, for all the reasons for the neighbors.
Ashley, you want to take that or?
So I think that is more a question for the village as far as your enforcement of this notice of violation that was issued, and not quite something that the zoning board would be opining on.
Okay.
That's a question, fair question, that'll be discussed separately between Corey and our liaison.
So as it stands, we're waiting for your lawyer's letter to clarify your position. So we can't make a vote on or do anything like that. So we need you to have that letter in by 2 weeks. That would be fair, and you will obviously CC it to the village attorney. So today is the 10th, so by the 24th. So by the 24th, we'll have a letter, and that will give you plenty of time to respond.
Just give me a week or so.
Yeah, okay, and then that you'll forward it to us, and then we'll have all the information we need, and then we can decide how we're gonna vote on this at the next meeting.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to move forward is if we get all of this chopped out.
Want to leave the public hearing open in case the public wants to say anything more based on what they heard?
Yes,
That's
Couldn't imagine.
Ashley, or you can leave it open for written comment.
yeah, we can leave it open. Yeah, we should. Yeah, we'll leave it open. We'll leave it open for public hearing. Yep, okay, so,
So then you can do a motion to adjourn the public hearing to June 14th at 7 PM or soon thereafter, as the matter can be heard.
a motion to,
Yeah, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
aye,
6:14.
yes. Okay, and I think that's it, right? So now we just have to go through housekeeping stuff.
All right, thank you all.
Thank you for your support. Thank you. That was very clear and very concise. I appreciate that.
Thank you for being here.
So we don't have to approve minutes, but we always do, so, I motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make a motion.
Second. Favor? Aye, so minutes are approved. Village update, Stana, you can't go, you have to update us on the village people. You got nothing? All right, so the village updates are nothing. And so I have a motion to close the meeting.
I'll make a motion.
Second. Second, aye.
Aye.
Aye, good, done.
Hey, everyone.
Thanks, Ashley.
Autumn, how do you like your job?